uh, next session, which is of inclusion dialogue. And it would be talking about speeding social inclusion. For this, we have Mr. Samir Kochhar, Chairman, SKOCH Group, among with us, and also Dr. Saurabh Garg, Secretary, Department of Social Justice and Empowerment. Dr. Saurabh Garg is the Secretary, Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, and he was earlier the Chief Executive Officer of Unique Identification Authority of India. Prior to this, he was the Principal Secretary of Department of Agriculture and Farmers Empowerment, Odisha, where he worked on digitalizing agriculture and developing a direct income transfer scheme for farmers. Many more to credit for, sir. Thank you so much for joining, sir.
Welcome, Dr. Garg. It's indeed a pleasure to have you with us. I've had the pleasure of knowing you over your various hats that you've been wearing. And I think a very rich experience from grassroots departments to something as important as Aadhaar, and now something which is very incredibly close to my heart, social welfare and justice. You know, I've seen you in various avatars. And, you know, being a reform historian, the first question I'd like to ask you is, how do you think over the last decade or so, social welfare and social justice has kind of panned out? Has anything changed? What is the progress you'd like to change?
So I would just like to first mention that thing that ensuring a life of basic human dignity is something which is the basis of social justice and social protection. And there is a very good index that has been developed now, which is called the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, which looks at growth in 3 dimensions: health, education, and standard of living. There are 2 indicators for health, which look at nutrition and child mortality. Education looks at years of schooling and the school attendance. And there are 6 indicators for minimum, the standards of living, which includes cooking fuel, electricity, housing, water, drinking water, sanitation, and assets that a household has. And this is the index which in a way encompasses what the minimum dignity of human living that individual is expected to have, and the basis of social justice. And I think the changes that we have seen, in fact, if you look at it from 2015-16 to 2021, there has been more than a 16% drop in the people who were below the standard, the benchmark. And that has been possible because of the targeted programs for social security in each of these 10 dimensions that I mentioned. So the focus, and if I can also put it in another manner, that if you look at it, the people who require social justice can be broadly grouped into 3 kinds of sets. One is, which you can take across the age life cycle. You have children who might be street children or others. You have women who have maybe pregnant women, lactating women, safety is, and then you have senior citizens. So that's one set of people for whom social justice programs focus on. The second are those who are affected by natural disasters. They could be cyclones, floods, etc. They could be climate change-induced disasters, flash floods, etc. Then you have pandemics, epidemics which require. And then you have the third set of, which is a broader social inclusion focused on the marginalized and the vulnerable sections. So if you look at it, I can talk of the programs that are there, interventions on each of these 3 sets of people. But combined, the focus is on ensuring a minimum level of dignity.
That's absolutely wonderful to hear, because, you know, when we started in 1997, our motto was inclusion, mainstreaming the marginalized. And we've kind of lived by that, and we defined inclusion as social inclusion, digital inclusion, and financial inclusion, to which we have now added a 4th leg, which is sustainability. But, you know, inclusion is a very vast subject, and practically the job of all of the government is to deliver just that. But within that, of course, you have the verticals that bring in the focus, such as your ministry. And one of the things that you did mention is that you have these three broad groups, and you've been able to construct some very focused interventions that are addressing. Some of the recent ones I also saw you did something called PM Pradhan Mantri Daksh Yojana was there, SRMS is there. So if you could take us through sector by sector, how you've brought a higher degree of focus, that would really nice.
So if you look at, as you very correctly mentioned, that social justice is an across the government responsibility. And let me just talk of certain programs which contribute significantly to ensuring social security, social protection, social justice. The broadest, biggest one of them is the National Food Security Act, which provides 5 kgs of wheat or rice per household every month, and more than 90 crore people are who benefit from it. And this ensures that there is no hunger and starvation at any level, and this is the broadest one that you can talk of. The second, which is nearly as broad as this, is the Manrega program, which is the Rural Employment Guarantee Program, which assures 100 days of work to any person in the rural areas who does not have work, and it assures a minimum of wages that they can get. These are two extremely broad programs. You have specific programs, since a lot of bankers out here, they would be aware of the Mudra Yojana, the PM Swanidhi Yojana, which looks at street vendors, which looks at MSMEs and looks at specific. Then you have, when I was talking about the life cycle issues, you have the Poshan program, which looks at young children in the Anganwadis and in the midday, and in the schools you have the midday meals program, so which ensures a basic level of nutrition to people, young children and people who are in school. And then you have the Matritva support program for maternity benefits to women to ensure that the loss in wages is taken care of. So, and then you have for the senior citizens, we have programs, or those who are shelterless, we run old age programs. In fact, we run more than 600 old age homes across the country, so that senior citizens who don't have a means of living or unable, then they're there. And of course, there are assistive devices. Similarly, if you look at on disaster related, you always have some kind of relief which is given, whether it's a pest attack or whether it's a drought, and you have specific programs. And then you have specific social inclusion programs, which focus on scholarships for those who are marginalized and underprivileged, focus on housing for the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana. And I mentioned about the multidimensional poverty index. So for cooking fuel, you have PEHEL. For housing, of course, PMAY. The Jal Jeevan mission to look at drinking water. The Swachh Bharat for sanitation. So for each of the different identified dimensions which are necessary for an individual to live a life of dignity, there are very, very clear and targeted programs. And I think that clarity is what is helping to ensure that it reaches the people. One other point which I want to mention, you mentioned about digital inclusion. And I think we haven't given digital, what should I say, penetration over the past decade, the importance that it should be given for social inclusion. 10 years back, I was chief executive of Aadhaar until early this year. Aadhaar was assumed to be a means of social exclusion, that people won't have the Aadhaar number and therefore they will get excluded. Now I can say we've reached a stage where digital penetration has ensured that digital means are the means for social inclusion, because every resident adult in the country has an Aadhaar. And we have reached that stage, and it is because of that we could do the DBT through the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile. Jan Dhan, all the bankers are here, more than 50 crore accounts have been created. Mobile penetration is obviously so much more, around more than 90 crores. And it can be used whether it's a smartphone or a feature phone. You have the BharatNet program ensuring optic fibers to each panchayat. You have the Bhashini app or the system software, which will translate real time from English or any other language to any other language. And then you have the more than nearly 5.5 lakh, nearly 6 lakh citizen service centers in the 6.5 lakh villages, which ensures that even if a person does not have access to a computer or a device, they can walk across and get support in any of these citizen service centers. So I think the impact that digital integration, in digital penetration has had on inclusion, social inclusion especially, financial inclusion of course, I think we need to recognize that and ensure that we further piggyback on this and ensure that the inclusion reaches each individual at the last mile.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, to sum up the discussion thus far, what Dr. Garg has just told us is that one thing that has changed is that the interventions in the social sector have become far more targeted. There is a lot of technology enablement. The targeting is better basically because of the technology enablement. There are far less leakages in the system. Also, the chain of linkages between the citizen and the government are being shortened using technology. But then there is another very important aspect, which is where mostly the programs historically have failed, which is the area of monitoring. So to how far, and I see now dashboards being used extremely extensively in the government. So what is that, and aspirational districts, etc. I think one of the key success factors is very, very intense monitoring.
Yeah. I think one of the essential features to ensure better monitoring is to be able to measure what you want to monitor. Because what you can't measure, you can't monitor. What you can't monitor will not happen, will not get achieved. And I think that's the point that I started off when I mentioned about the multidimensional poverty index. Looking at 10 dimensions, look at 10 indicators and look at monitoring. I think dashboards have become so much easier because real-time data can be fed in at the field level and which is then available at all levels to be accessed. Because of the use of technology, you are able to generate reports in any method of combination of fields that you require. We have, for example, a Prime Minister's Adarsh Gramya Yojana that we run, in which we look at 50 parameters for those in those villages which are scheduled caste dominated. There are 18,000 villages in the country which have scheduled caste population of more than 50%, and 29,000 villages if you reduce that benchmark from 50% to 40%. For each of these 29,000 villages, we have developed a dashboard on 50 parameters that we do. And there's a village development plan that is developed, and we give support that. And based on that, funding is given. So each of the departments has been able to develop these kind of monitoring mechanisms by the use of technology, by the ensuring that at the ground level there are people who can feed in this information, and that information can be fed by the use of a smart phone, of which more than nearly 60 crore now exist in the country, or through a computer which is available through a citizen service center, which out of the 6.5 lakh villages, nearly 6 lakh villages have. So it's a combination of infrastructure having expanded, a combination of minimum digital literacy being there, and identifying what is to be measured so that you can monitor and develop. And I think that monitoring is showing up in every field that we have.
So, your ministry, government in general, and your ministry in particular, seems to be laying a lot of emphasis on education as a tool for empowerment. I think close to 80% of your budget is allocated towards education. Yes. So what is the ethos behind it, and it's going to get more intense, or it's going to get into more diversified areas?
Yeah. So I think when we look at empowerment, we look at it in three broad areas. One is social empowerment, economic empowerment, and educational empowerment. Social empowerment is very often by means of legislation, which various legislation which is there. And implementation of that is at a much broader level in terms of awareness generation, in terms of ensuring that adequate punitive measures are there if there is any violation of basic human dignity at any level. And so that's again an across the board function. Economic empowerment which is something which a lot of the banks do, a lot of the programs, whether it's Manrega or a lot of the programs that are run. And in fact, we run a venture capital fund to develop entrepreneurship. And I think the contribution of entrepreneurship towards social transformation has not yet been fully focused on or examined, but the kind of benefits and the kind of collateral, what should I say, impact it has is so much more if there is entrepreneurs at the lowest level and the marginalized. But in order to achieve this, it's a very basic level of education is required. That's why we fund in higher education anyone from the marginalized, vulnerable, identified communities. If someone is going to do a master's or a PhD, we fund them fully. We fund anywhere up to right to education up to class 8 is, in any case, universalized. So from class 9, 10, 11, 12, to ensure that there are no dropouts in any of the communities or the groups identified as vulnerable, marginalized, deprived, we ensure that that should not be a basis for them to not go in for higher education. So we fund, in fact, top class, we've identified top class colleges, top class schools. So anyone who has merit and wants to join, we fund. So I think that's the basis that if a person is educated, then you can think of economic empowerment, then you can think of social empowerment. We don't focus on health because health itself is a much multidimensional. Ayushman Bharat and other programs are there, which are in any case universal, where there is a top-up, which is what the educational quality education, that is what we focus on.
And how has this been absorbed at the state level? Are the states performing better than before? Well,
in fact, I would say the states, many of the states have the top-up programs on the education part. If, let's say, we give X, they add a delta X to that and provide. If we are giving it to a set of communities, they have broadened that. So I think the states are fully integrated in the programs. Most of our programs are what we call 60-40 programs, 60% by the central government and 40% by the state governments. And given that the state governments and the districts and all our programs are implemented through them. So it's definitely a cooperative federalism approach that we follow because social justice cannot be done at individual in a siloed approach. And I think the contribution, the support of the state governments across the country is something that we totally depend on.
So, one interesting suggestion that came up this morning is on economic development. Of course, much needs to be done for the marginalized there. And the House was of the opinion that the cost of capacity building, livelihood linkage, etc., is a pretty high cost. And when they go as a fintech or an NBFC to lend to these people to set up the JLGs or the SHGs or whatever capacity they need to build, the cost is very high, and that cost then may not be affordable for the end beneficiary. So over a period of time, a lot of suggestions have been there. One suggestion we are talking about is a universal financial services obligation fund or a central fund of some sort where, suppose your ministry is targeted on the marginalized. So could you not set aside some money which is going directly as an interest subvention, no strings attached, if there is a lending to the marginalized? Even if it's a modest amount, I think that would be a good start.
No, we have programs for interest subvention and giving support in credit at lower interests. In fact, we have 3 corporations who work on this, and there's a Vishwas scheme which focuses on interest subvention. Up till now, they had been working primarily with state government channelizing agencies. But I think over the past year or more, we are tying up with SIDBI so that they have a yojana called Prayas, where we would partner with SIDBI, and then SIDBI, the program Prayas, in turn, partners with a lot of microfinance institutions, so that the interest subvention that we offer from our department gets added to the support that SIDBI provides under Prayas. And hence, that support can be given to the ultimate consumer. We had also, we had a credit guarantee separate trust mechanism, but we are merging with the credit guarantee trust of MS, Micro and Small CGT MSE. So that it's mainstreamed in that, and loans which are of a smaller volume can get that support, and the margin requirements can further be reduced. So this is an area that we would be happy, and on this platform I would be happy to invite, in case there's anything else, or how we can strengthen the interest subvention programs that we have, which are focused on the vulnerable, marginalized, and the deprived sections. We look forward to working with not only the banking sector, but the NBFC and the MFSI also, so that ultimately the end user benefits.
Yeah. So what we would do at SKOCH is we would organize a consultation between NBFCs, and now that we know that there is something called Prayas and there is an interest subvention available from the Ministry of Social Welfare and Justice, how better you can utilize that scheme. Is it a very good scheme? Does something need to be changed or tweaked for it to work better? And we would be happy to give those recommendations back. My last question to you, sir, is India is now in the Amrit Kal, and we're talking about a 30 trillion economy by 2047. So in this time frame, at the end, let's say thinking ahead to 2047, how does the social sector look to you?
So, in fact, the Vision 2047 or Viksit Bharat, that is something that I think each of the departments has been working on it for more than a couple of years. The social justice on the sector, the welfare sector is also, we have looked at each of the different groups that I mentioned, whether it's women, children, senior citizens, the marginalized communities. What needs to be done in terms of the social sector, the economic sector, the educational sector, and the health issues, and keeping in view what is the goal in 2047. I think that's something that each of the ministries has developed, is working, and at an appropriate time, I suppose there would be a formal, but those goals are very clear, that we want to be a developed nation by, if not before, latest by 2047. And what is the path that we have to take, that each department, each ministry, each sector is working on. And I think we should reach there, if not earlier, latest, definitely, what the vision of the government is.
Thank you very much. God's blessings be added to your work. We will be a developed nation with no woman, man, or transgender left behind. Thank you very much.